Everything began in the highlands of Ethiopia, where coffee was just a wild shrub, untamed, unwanted, and overlooked. Legend has it, and it's one of the most famous, though debated stories, that a goat herder named Kaldi noticed something strange. After eating bright red berries from these mysterious bushes, his goats became insanely energetic. He, of course, had to try them himself and felt such a surge of energy that he was stunned. Kaldi ran to the local monastery, but the monks just dismissed him. Wild berries? That's the devil's temptation, they decided, and tossed them straight into the fire. But then something incredible happened. A heavenly, enticing aroma of roasted beans began to waft from the fire. Intrigued to their core, the monks gathered the beans, ground them up, brewed them, and voila. That was the birth of the very first coffee beverage in history. A beautiful legend, sure. But the reality was perhaps much more mundane. We know that long before coffee was drunk, the Oromo tribes were already using the berries as a powerful nutritional and energy supplement, mixing them with fat. And that's the real intrigue. The clash between mystical legend and historical fact is exactly what makes the origins of coffee so captivating. Just imagine how accidentally and mysteriously this fruit was discovered, a fruit destined to turn the world upside down. By the way, the first documented mention of coffee as a drink dates back to the 15th century, appearing in the Sufi monasteries of Yemen. From Yemen, coffee began its triumphant march across the entire Islamic world. It instantly became kahwa, the drink of Sufi mystics, essential for their night vigils and spiritual practices, helping them stay alert. But here's where it gets interesting. Coffee quickly burst out from behind monastery walls and literally took over the streets. That's how the first kane coffee houses appeared. And these weren't just places to grab a quick caffeine fix. They were true hubs of intellectual, social, and even political life. Poets, philosophers, and merchants gathered there. Life was buzzing. People exchanged news, shared ideas, and closed deals. These coffee houses became a kind of public internet of the time, actual platforms for free discussion that skillfully bypassed strict censorship. But, as always happens with new ideas and emerging pockets of freedom, coffee immediately faced resistance. True coffee wars began. Conservative authorities and clergy saw coffee houses as an immediate threat to public order, morality, to everything. They feared they would become breeding grounds for sedition and revolt. Coffee was banned, then allowed again, and hit with draconian taxes. Yet when people need something this much, you can't stop it. It's striking, isn't it? How a new public space, like a coffee house, can simultaneously be an engine of progress and a source of fear for those in power. So how did this Eastern elixir make its way to the West, where a different, but no less dramatic, fate awaited it? In the 17th century, coffee finally reached Europe, and the Europeans, especially the church, initially met it with hostility. The bitter invention of Satan, that's how they branded it, wary of its exotic origins, and most importantly, the energetic effect that seemed highly suspicious. But the history of coffee is full of wild turns. There is one legend, I'll admit it's quite debated. Supposedly, Pope Clement VIII himself decided to try this devil's drink before definitively banning it, and his surprise was immense when he found the drink to be so pleasant. According to the lore, the Pope exclaimed, "This drink is so delicious that it would be a sin to let only the infidels have it. Let's baptize it." And just like that, coffee received a blessing from above, starting its triumphant path into the hearts of Europeans. In reality, regardless of the truth of this lovely legend, coffee arrived in Europe at a very, very convenient time. Back then, alcohol was the main drink, often due to poor water quality, and naturally that led to widespread intoxication and a total lack of productivity. Coffee became a true panacea, a safe, stimulating alternative that didn't cloud the mind, but rather cleared it. It was a total lifesaver, rescuing society from old, questionable drinking traditions. Just imagine how important a clean, safe drink was in that era. This cultural revolution, sparked by a single beverage, is simply staggering. Whether thanks to the Pope's light touch or just common sense, coffee houses spread incredibly fast across Europe, becoming a true phenomenon of the 17th and 18th centuries. And while in the Islamic world they were centers of public life, in Europe they quickly earned the status of penny universities. That's exactly what they were called. For a symbolic fee, anyone could walk in, grab a coffee, and immediately join the conversation, hear the latest news, or read the newspapers. These were the very places where the ideas of the Enlightenment were born and shaped. Voltaire, Rousseau, and other great thinkers constantly met in coffee houses, exchanging ideas that later blew the world apart. Politics boiled over here, and business deals were made. By the way, the famous insurance market Lloyd's of London was born in Edward Lloyd's coffee house. And in France, just imagine, it was in these coffee houses that the foundations for the French Revolution were laid. People could express their thoughts freely, criticize the authorities, and exchange information, all without the fear of being immediately silenced by censorship. It's incredible how places for leisure and simple social interaction became incubators for such radical ideas, breaking down class barriers and challenging the established order. Coffee houses literally democratized access to knowledge and stimulated critical thinking, showing that thinking could be as accessible as having a cup of coffee. But unfortunately, every great story has a dark side, and the history of coffee is no exception. The growing demand in Europe for this stimulating drink led to one of the gloomiest chapters: European colonialism, and most horrifyingly, slavery. To satisfy the insatiable appetite of European coffee houses, colonial powers, the Dutch, the French, the British, began mass planting coffee in their colonies. From Indonesia and the Caribbean to vast swathes of South America, these plantations relied on the inhumane exploitation of millions of Africans, who were forcibly taken from their homelands like livestock. Slave labor was the foundation of the entire coffee industry, especially in Brazil, where slavery thrived until the very end of the 19th century, all the way until 1888. Furthermore, colonial metropoles set draconian monopolies on coffee trade, siphoning off huge profits and leaving the producing nations in desperate poverty and dependency. The Dutch East India Company is just one of the brightest examples of these greedy giants. It's an incredible contrast. A fragrant drink, a symbol of enlightenment and freedom of thought, produced through inhumane exploitation, slavery, and violence. Every cup of coffee sipped in European salons was quite literally paid for in blood and sweat. When coffee turned into such a strategically vital resource, it's no surprise that true wars were waged over it, even if not always with weapons. These were economic and geopolitical battles for total control over the most profitable commodity of the time. One of the most striking examples is the legendary Great Coffee Escape by French officer Gabriel de Clieu. In the early 18th century, in 1723, he risked his life to smuggle coffee seedlings from Dutch plantations to Martinique. This daring move kicked off the coffee industry in the Caribbean and essentially in all of Latin America. It was pure economic espionage and unprecedented entrepreneurship that redrew the entire map of global coffee production. And in the early 20th century, when Brazil had already become a dominant player in the coffee market, it faced overproduction and a catastrophic price crash. And what did they do? They came up with a truly shocking tactic, burning surplus crops on massive bonfires just to protect prices on the global market. Just imagine, millions of bags of premium coffee going up in smoke, all for the sake of economic gain. This clearly shows how an ordinary commodity can become the center of espionage, complex economic intrigue, and serious geopolitical games. Can you draw parallels to modern-day commodity wars or the fight for technological supremacy? I sure can. The entire history of coffee is also an endless story of debates over its health effects. At the very beginning, in the Islamic world, it was considered almost a panacea, a sort of universal medicine that provided energy and helped with focus. However, by the 18th century in Europe, some very serious concerns emerged. Coffee was blamed for every sin under the sun, from insomnia and nervousness to all sorts of absurd illnesses. It reached ridiculous levels. In Sweden, King Gustav III, obsessed with proving coffee was harmful, even organized a famous coffee experiment. He sentenced two twin brothers to life in prison, requiring one to drink coffee and the other to drink tea. All this just to see who would die first. Interestingly, both outlived the king and his doctors. Today, modern science offers us, fortunately, a much more balanced understanding. We know the benefits of coffee. It's a source of powerful antioxidants and can improve cognitive function. But we're also aware of the risks, like the negative impact on sleep and the nervous system for sensitive people. To me, this is a clear example of how easily truths about diet and health change, and how important it is not to fall for extremes. The Industrial Revolution, of course, couldn't ignore coffee either. What was once an exotic drink requiring special attention to roasting and preparation quickly became a mass-market, accessible product, thanks to industrialization. Key milestones here include the improvement of roasting processes and, of course, the invention of vacuum packaging in the 19th and 20th centuries. Giants like Folgers and Maxwell House made coffee incredibly convenient for home storage and preparation. That was a huge step forward, but the true mass conquest of the world happened with the invention of instant coffee. Just imagine, instant coffee, especially from brands like Nescafé, gained incredible popularity during the World Wars. It was fast, practical, and required no complex equipment. The perfect drink for soldiers on the front lines, a real lifesaver. It was a total triumph of convenience and mass production that made coffee truly global, accessible to literally anyone who wanted a quick boost. A natural reaction to standardized and, frankly, often soulless mass-market coffee was the so-called third wave of coffee, which began in the late 20th century and continues today. It was a kind of uprising, a real revolution of taste and ethics against the total standardization of the industry. The third wave literally shifted the focus back to the origin of the beans, their variety, and the region where they were grown. Coffee stopped being just coffee. It became Ethiopian heirloom from Yirgacheffe, or Colombian bourbon. The art of roasting came back into the spotlight, from light to dark, and every nuance became incredibly important. The variety of brewing methods, pour-overs, AeroPress, siphons, espresso machines, turned coffee making into a true ritual and even an entire science. But most importantly, in my opinion, the third wave brought consciousness to the industry. It raised vital questions of ethics and sustainability, fair trade, direct trade, and environmental stewardship. Coffee stopped being just a drink. It became an object of deep study, aesthetic pleasure, and most importantly, conscious consumption. I really resonate with this pursuit of quality and ethics, as it shows how consumer trends can change entire industries. And so, my friends, we arrive at our time. Coffee has conquered the world, becoming an inseparable part of our culture and economy. But its future, alas, is far from certain and is full of serious challenges. The main threat today is perhaps climate change. Coffee harvests, especially for sensitive varieties like Arabica, are under real threat of extinction. Regions where the best coffee has traditionally been grown might simply become unsuitable. More than ever, we see an urgent need for sustainable and ethical production to fight exploitation, environmental degradation, and support farmers. The coffee industry, of course, is actively seeking solutions. New, more resilient varieties are being developed, and innovative farming technologies are being studied. There are even completely futuristic ideas, like lab-grown synthetic coffee, all to try and reduce the burden on the planet. So a drink that survived legends, wars, bans, and revolutions is now fighting for its own survival in the face of global environmental and social issues. Its future remains uncertain. What will coffee look like in 50 or 100 years? That is the incredible and sometimes shocking story of coffee, a drink that started as a wild shrub in Ethiopia, traveled through Sufi monasteries, Eastern coffeehouses, European salons, and slave-run plantations, and finally became a symbol of enlightenment and today, an object of art and ethics. As a true coffee lover, I am constantly amazed at how rich and dramatic its biography is. Every sip of this fragrant drink isn't just a caffeine boost. It's an echo of centuries full of intrigue, passion, victories, and defeats. Coffee didn't just change our habits, it influenced economics, politics, culture, and even human thinking itself. So the next time you're enjoying your cup, remember this amazing story. It shows that even the most ordinary things in our lives hide entire worlds full of secrets and unexpected turns.